President Trump's much anticipated trip to China last week resulted in few concrete outcomes, but demonstrated both sides' desire to stabilize the relationship. Still, disagreements over key issues like Iran and Taiwan were conspicuous. So, what does the visit mean for the trajectory of U.S. China relations? I'm Adam Gallagher, a contributing fellow at Defense Priorities, and today I'll be speaking with Lyle Goldstein, the Asia Program Director at Defense Priorities, to unpack the key takeaways from the Trump Xi summit. Here are three things you need to know. Hey, Lyle, thanks a lot for joining me today to talk about the takeaways from the Trump Xi summit in Beijing last week. I want to start off talking a little bit about how the war in Iran loomed over Trump's visit. And both sides sort of talked about around the issue a little bit. Trump said that they agreed on reopening the Strait of Hormuz and Iran not being able to have this toll system over the strait. China was a little bit more muted on that. So I'm wondering if you could talk through, how they addressed the Iran issue and if Trump got anything real on Iran from Xi.
Okay, well, Adam, good to be with you and everyone. Let me say at the outset, I'm very pleased this summit took place, and I think it's extremely important for the leaders of the two superpowers to dialogue frequently. So that's a relief. And I feared that the summit wouldn't take place at all because of the Iran war. So
Right.
I'm glad it did take place. But as everybody suspected, Iran was definitely, if you will, the elephant in the room, along with a few other issues. But that was a big one. I think, it's mostly speculation about what really transpired. We don't have, as near as I can tell, much concrete information. I think you summarized it well. I mean, President Trump mentioned that he got Xi to agree not to send weapons, and I think he also said that Iran agreed with the U.S. position that there should be no tolls covering the Strait of Hormuz, run, of course, by Iran. I mean, my reading is that both sides emphasized what they wanted to as far as the readout. So I think we'll talk about Taiwan momentarily, but the Chinese side tended to emphasize Taiwan. The U.S. side tended to emphasize movement on Iran.
Right.
Frankly, I think the Chinese commitments here were, let's call them opaque at best. So yeah, nothing concrete. Now, it doesn't mean there's nothing there. A lot of times when we're talking about these kind of, if you will, superpower summit, it is all about kind of informal, if you will, gentlemen's agreements. So this is not that weird. I do think China is sincere that it wants the strait open. I think it's quite credible that China probably did say that it opposes tolls. So the real question in my mind is, how far is China willing to go to influence Iran in a positive direction? And here I must say I have my doubts, having watched, for example, China deal with North Korea, another, if you will, truculent friend of China. China, in those circumstances, seemed very reluctant to exercise pressure and influence. The style of Chinese diplomacy is to use carrots and to kind of slowly mediate forward, but not to push. So, yeah, I don't think we should expect much movement there. But I do think on the margins, China can be helpful. And let's not forget, not only do they have a lot of influence in Tehran, they do, but they also have a lot of influence with Pakistan and other countries in the area. Oman is an important country here, as is Saudi. So, I mean, China, has a lot of, I would say, soft power influence in this whole area. Let's not forget, in 2023, they brokered quite an impressive agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So, they do have a bit of a track record for helping to solve problems with this kind of practical step-by-step mediation. So I'm not altogether pessimistic, but also not expecting China to be able to solve the issue.
Sure, sure. So Xi was pretty straightforward in the opening session with Trump in addressing the Taiwan issue. He said that mishandling of it could cause great jeopardy in U.S. China relations. So I'm wondering what you take away from that sort of like upfront, immediate, what some in the media described as kind of aggressive posture of Xi's on Taiwan, and then also if you could assess for us how Trump dealt with the Taiwan issue during the summit.
Mhm. Sure. I mean, it's I think a lot of the commentary that I'm reading in the U.S. press and among the American experts has tended to suggest that kind of China's behavior was inappropriate or over the top,
Hmm.
or set a bad tone for the meeting. I don't see it that way at all. To me, uh, the Taiwan issue absolutely had to be addressed, and
Right.
anybody who has any familiarity with the Chinese media and the outlook of Chinese foreign policy and defense elites knows well that they're not kidding when they call Taiwan the core of their core interests. I mean, it really is for Xi Jinping and um, his colleagues at the top of the Chinese government. They consider it, if not issue number one, certainly right up there with stability for the country. So in that sense, I wasn't at all surprised, and I even consider it a good thing because, and this is precisely why we have to have these summits. It's not, to my mind, it's not. I mean, sure, in our dreams, we'd love to see a set of grand bargains that move our world to a much more peaceful place. But the reality is that that's quite unlikely. But what is possible is this dialogue at a very high level for them to actually, they sort of have to sit and listen to each other and understand each other's priorities. So our priority right now is on Iran.
Yeah.
Uh, no question about that, as we discussed. But their priority has been, it's been this way for decades. Uh, it go back to the foundation of U.S. China relations. In the period of Nixon Kissinger right through to normalization in 1979, it was Taiwan, 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 and so their
Hmm.
focus is very consistent. No surprises here. The language that China used was very tough. Right at one point, I think she said this is extremely dangerous. He alluded to the possibility of conflict, which if anyone needs a translation, he's talking about war between our two countries.
Right.
And the Chinese side urged us to be extremely cautious. And um, to me, that's just common sense. We're talking about two nuclear armed superpowers. Of course, we should be extremely cautious. I mean, China should
Yeah.
also be extremely cautious. So, on that, let's proceed on that basis. Both sides exercising restraint and caution, that we can get to a more stable place. But it starts with discussion and dialogue and understanding each other's priorities, where we stand, where are the red lines. Um, to be sure, I would hope for more. I would hope for like sort of along the lines of the gentleman's agreement we were talking about in Iran. I would love to have seen some kind of reciprocal de-escalation. Whether we're talking about some of the Chinese exercises around Taiwan or some of these arms sales, some of the U.S. Deployments, which have been, on a trend toward extraordinary growth. Right, each exercise needs to be bigger than the last exercise that we held in the Luzon Strait. That's perceived in China to be very threatening. So it's a dicey situation. I'm glad to see we're pulling back from the brink. I think there's a couple other hopeful trends that I see here too. So I'm more optimistic than I was 6 months ago for sure.
Okay. So those are kind of the two big security issues, Iran and Taiwan. Of course, there's a whole other bevy of issues. in the relationship, especially right now when it comes to trade and technology issues. So I'm wondering, Lyle, if you could kind of just give us your assessment of where U.S. China relations stand here, 18 months into the second Trump administration, and kind of where you think the trajectory is going during the rest of Trump's term.
Well, I'm I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that things could be far worse. I mean, let's recall in the first term, Trump had brought on some major China hawks.
Yeah.
Talking Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. I mean, it doesn't get more hawkish than that. And that tandem sent U.S. China relations into a spiral of instability and honestly put us on a course for war. We're still recovering from the damage that was done in that period, I must say. But I'm more hopeful today, significantly more, although, we can name more than a few major hawks, or if you will, people with a very anti-China outlook in the administration. So they're still there, some of them. But at the same time, we've seen some course corrections here.
Yep.
And it's very interesting to consider how they came about. But let's not forget that one moment in, I think, must have been September, October of last year, where the Chinese said they were going to impose restrictions on the export of rare earths. And, this was I consider that a watershed moment, really, in, if you will, in sort of modern diplomatic history, because really it's hard to think of such a moment where a country stood up in that kind of stalwart way against American pressure. And who blinked? It seems like our side, the U.S.
Right.
blinked. So that's a very interesting moment. Believe me, having met with a lot of Chinese interlocutors, they believe that was a world historical moment. So we ought to consider that on our side too. What does it mean? Well, maybe it means we come together now as equals, and we realize that both sides are responsible for shepherding this relationship. Neither one really holds any decisive card. The fact is, they have points of pressure on us, and we have points of pressure on them. So with that realization, we can go forward maybe in a more sort of equal and mature way. So it seems to me that Trump has taken this on board. I mean, frankly, he's always seems to be making favorable comments about China and about U.S.-China relations going way back. So he never seems to have really bought into this Cold War mentality. So I'll give him high marks there. I mean, where the difficulty, I think, has been for the Trump administration here is developing kind of a consistent approach and really giving this the priority that it requires. I mean, we saw this really in the summit in a way. Frankly, I think the U.S. team seemed a little unprepared for major compromises and muscle movements. It just didn't seem to be a lot of beyond the obvious ones, soybeans, Boeings, and so forth.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be ready to make any major compromises. So kind of in reactive mode. But that's what happens with a country at war. I mean, the United States is clearly all our top diplomats and so forth are focused on the Persian Gulf right now. So how are they
Right.
going to make major decisions? But all, overall, though, my assessment is that U.S.-China relations are in a better place than I would have thought. I guess if I had to grade this administration on China, I'd give them, maybe a B minus, C plus. I think, better than expected, but a far cry though from what I would hope for. It's still a very tense relationship. There are so many points of tension. Our militaries are in close proximity, and I believe both militaries are still working in earnest. preparing for the possibility of war. So it continues to be a dangerous situation, and I think we need to work harder. I'm talking about people in Washington and in Beijing to stabilize the relationship, and that involves probably would mean a concrete set of compromises on all those difficult issues. Taiwan, absolutely, of course, that's the hardest one. But
Sure.
let's also talk about the South China Sea. Let's talk about Let's talk about the Korean Peninsula. Let's talk about strategic arms talks. I mean, those are and that's just the security side. Never mind the
Right.
economic side, which is even just as complicated. So, we need to roll up our sleeves and continue to make progress here. But tentatively, yes, I am pleased that things are better than they were 6 months or a year ago. Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Lyle. I mean, it looks like Trump and Xi will meet three more times this year. So hopefully that'll provide more ground to stabilize the relationship and actually move forward on some of these important issues. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate your analysis and want to encourage everybody to visit defensepriorities.org and check out all the analysis that you're doing on China, that our whole defense priorities team is doing, Iran, and on all the other major foreign policy issues of the day.
Thanks, Adam.